Ethan Miller had never been the paranoid type. He wasn't the kind of man who jumped at shadows or checked under his bed before sleep. But living alone in a ground-floor apartment in a busy city, he knew he couldn't be careless either. The building had a reputation. Break-ins, strange noises in the night, tenants whispering about things going missing. So when the landlord offered to install a new security system, motion-activated cameras in the hallway, living room, and front door, Ethan agreed without hesitation. At first, it gave him peace of mind. The small black monitors sat on his desk, screens flickering with grainy feeds of empty rooms. Nothing but stillness, the occasional flicker of headlights passing through the blinds, or the soft sway of a curtain in the draft. He told himself he would probably never need the footage, but it was comforting to know it was there. That comfort lasted 3 weeks. On a Friday night in late autumn, Ethan returned home after work exhausted. He kicked off his shoes, tossed his jacket onto the couch, and microwaved leftover pizza. The city buzzed faintly outside, but inside it was quiet. Too quiet. He was halfway through his meal when he noticed something strange on the monitor. The hallway feed showed movement. Ethan froze. Slice of pizza suspended midair. The screen flickered as the camera adjusted to the motion. He leaned closer, squinting. The hall was empty. No footsteps, no figure, no sign of life. But the little red light in the corner kept blinking steadily, indicating motion was being detected. Ethan set his plate aside and crossed the room. He checked the locks. Secure. Checked the blinds. Closed. He stood still, listening. Nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator. Shaking his head, he told himself it was a glitch. Maybe the system was too sensitive. Dust, a moth, a shadow. He went back to the couch and tried to ignore it. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. He sat at his desk, opened the security system's playback menu, and rewound to the moment from the night before. He expected to see nothing. But as the footage rolled, his blood turned cold. The hallway camera showed a still, dim corridor, empty. Then, in a single frame, a figure appeared. It wasn't gradual. 1 second the hallway was bare. The next a man stood there, perfectly still, head tilted upward as if staring straight into the lens. His face was blurred, smeared by the camera's grain. He was tall, shoulders slightly hunched, wearing dark clothes that seemed to swallow the light. The most unnerving detail was his posture. He didn't move. He didn't shift. He simply stood there, inhumanly still, for almost 2 full minutes. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, he was gone. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He dragged the timeline back and forth, frame by frame. There was no entry, no exit, no moment where the man rounded a corner or stepped into view. One frame, he wasn't there. The next, he was. And then, gone again. Ethan sat back, palms sweating. Had someone broken in? No, impossible. He would have noticed. The locks hadn't been tampered with. Besides, no one could vanish like that. It had to be a glitch, a corrupted file. He replayed it 3 more times, but the figure remained. Watching. He shut the laptop abruptly, the sound of the lid clicking far too loud in the silence. All day, the image haunted him. He caught himself glancing at the monitors every few minutes, dreading the sight of that shadowy figure again. By evening, he convinced himself it was nothing. Cameras glitched all the time. The mind played tricks, especially when you were tired. But that night, something new happened. He was lying in bed, the glow of the city bleeding faintly through the curtains. He had just started drifting when he heard a faint click. The sound of the front door unlocking. Ethan bolted upright. His heart slammed to his chest. He strained to listen, breath held tight. Another click, this time the unmistakable creak of the door hinge. He snatched the baseball bat he kept under the bed and crept into the hall. The front door stood closed, locked tight. He tested the handle. Secure. He checked the chain. Still latched. But when he glanced at the monitor on the desk, his stomach lurched. The front door camera showed it wide open. On the screen, the door gaped like a mouth, darkness stretching beyond it into a hall that looked strangely wrong. Longer somehow, tilted at an angle no hallway should bend. Ethan blinked hard and looked back at the door in reality. Closed. Firmly shut. He turned slowly back to the monitor. The door was still open on the feed. And in the corner of the frame, something shifted. A tall figure, hunched in shadow, moving silently across the warped hallway. Ethan's breath caught. He staggered back, fumbling for the power switch. He jabbed at the button until the monitors went black. The room plunged into darkness. He stood there, clutching the bat, heart pounding in his throat. Nothing moved. The door stayed shut. The apartment remained silent. But sleep never came that night. By dawn, Ethan convinced himself again that it had been a trick of the light, a glitch in the feed. He had to. Otherwise, the alternative was too unbearable. He decided to stop checking the recordings altogether. Out of sight, out of mind. That worked for 3 days. On the 4th night, as he sat on the couch, trying to lose himself in television, the monitor blinked. Movement detected. Living room camera. Ethan's head snapped up. The screen showed the room exactly as it was. Couch, table, blinds. Empty. Except he wasn't on the couch. On the feed, the couch was empty too. But Ethan was sitting right there, staring at the monitor, heart hammering. He stood slowly, legs weak, and stepped in front of the camera. He waved. On the monitor, the room remained empty. No Ethan. He backed away, throat tight with panic. His hands shook as he shut off the monitors again. He didn't know what was worse, the thought of being watched by something in his home, or the possibility that he wasn't really there at all. That night, as exhaustion finally dragged him towards sleep, he dreamed of the hallway footage. The blur man, the door yawning open to a place that bent wrong, and a whispering voice behind the static, low and steady, repeating the same phrase again and again. We see you. We see you. We see you. When Ethan awoke, sweat plastered his shirt to his back. The monitors were already on, humming softly. He hadn't turned them on. On every screen, his apartment sat empty. No couch, no desk, no Ethan, just the faint outline of a dark figure, waiting. Ethan didn't touch the monitors for the rest of the day. He made coffee, left the TV running, tried to drown himself in noise and normalcy. But the screens were always there in the corner of his vision, humming faintly, reminding him that they were watching even if he wasn't. By evening, the temptation grew unbearable. He told himself he would just check the system settings. Maybe it was a malfunction, a software error, something explainable. He sat at his desk, breathed deep, and clicked into the playback menu. The footage from last night queued up instantly. The hallway was still. The living room empty. Then, like before, it flickered. The figure appeared again. Tall, blurred, shoulders crooked in a way that made Ethan's skin crawl. But this time, the figure didn't just stand there. It moved. Frame by frame, Ethan watched it drift through the hall. Not walk, drift. Its legs moved, but strangely, as if the motion didn't connect to the ground. It passed directly beneath the camera, face angled up, eyes dark hollows in the grain. Ethan's stomach twisted. The figure kept moving, gliding toward the bedroom door. Toward him. He stopped the playback, slamming the laptop shut. The sound echoed through the apartment. His pulse thundered in his ears. He turned his head toward the hall. It was empty now. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar, just as he had left it. But in his mind, he saw the figure there, lingering outside, waiting. For the first time, he considered leaving, just walking out, finding a hotel, abandoning the cameras. But the thought of stepping into the hallway outside his door made his chest seize. If it was in here, could it also be out there? He tried to rationalize. Glitches. Faulty hardware. He would call the landlord in the morning and demand it all be removed. But when night came, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the building made his skin crawl. Every shift of the shadows felt like eyes fixed on him. At 3:12 a.m., the motion alert pinged again. Living room camera. Ethan sat bolt upright. He tried to ignore it, but his gaze was already locked on the glowing screen. The feed showed the living room exactly as it was, except for one detail. The couch was empty. He was sitting there, staring at the screen, but the camera showed nothing. Just vacant cushions, the faint imprint of where someone should be. Then, slowly, the cushions pressed inward, as though someone unseen had sat down beside the absence of him. Ethan's breath hitched. He clutched the bat tighter, eyes wide. On the screen, the invisible weight shifted, turning toward the spot where he should have been. The cushions dipped lower. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't scream. His throat locked tight, sweat dripping down his temples. The air around him felt colder, heavier, as though something had entered the room. And then, on the feed, the dark figure leaned in a frame. It was closer now, clearer, its face still smeared by static, but its mouth was unmistakable. It was smiling. Ethan slapped the power switch, plunging the screens into black. His chest heaved, panic tearing through him. He ran to the bedroom, slammed the door, shoved a chair under the knob. He didn't sleep. Not at all. By dawn, his eyes were bloodshot, hands trembling. He called the landlord immediately, voice shaking, demanding the cameras be removed. The landlord sighed heavily on the other end. I've had 3 other tenants complain about those systems this month. Interference, glitches, you name it. I'll send someone this week. This week, Ethan snapped. I can't. I need them gone now. The landlord's tone hardened. Earliest I can do is Thursday. See tights. Ethan hung up, fists trembling. It was Monday, for more nights. He unplugged the system himself, yanking cords from outlets, shoving cameras into a drawer. Relief washed over him, briefly. The silence of the dead monitors felt like a reprieve. But that night, as he lay in bed, he heard it again. The faint click of the door unlocking. He sat bolt upright, heart hammering. He had unplugged everything, powered it all down. There was no footage to check, but the sound was real. The hinges groaned. Ethan grabbed the bat and crept down the hall. The front door stood closed. Latched. Locked. He exhaled shakily. Maybe he was losing it. Maybe exhaustion was twisting sounds into nightmares. He touched the lock, just to be sure. Still tight. But when he turned, he froze. The black monitor on his desk glowed faintly. He had unplugged it. He was certain. Yet the screen hummed softly, light spilling across the desk. And on it, the front door gaped wide open. The warped hallway stretched beyond, shadows rippling in unnatural angles. And in the distance, that same tall figure stood, waiting, blurred and hunched, its head cocked too far to one side. Ethan staggered back, nearly tripping. His gaze darted between the real door, locked tight, and the feed, wide open, wrong, inviting. The figure took a step forward. Ethan bolted for the bedroom, slamming the door, heart pounding. He pressed his back against it, back clutched, white-knuckled. He stayed there until the sky paled with morning light. When he finally dared to peek out, the monitor was black again. But deep down, he knew the truth. Unplugging them didn't matter. Whatever it was, it didn't live in the cameras. The cameras just showed it. And now, it knew he was watching. Ethan's apartment no longer felt like home. Every corner held shadows that seemed too deep. Every creak of the floorboards made his chest tighten. He tried leaving once, just for coffee, just for air, but the moment he stepped outside, he felt eyes burning into his back. He caught himself glancing at every security camera on the street, convinced one of them would flicker and show him something he wasn't ready to see. He turned back before he even reached the end of the block. By the time night fell again, he was exhausted, shaky from lack of sleep. The monitors were still black, silent. He had shoved them into the bottom drawer of his desk, stuffed sweaters on top, as if burying them might keep them quiet. But even through the closed drawer, he swore he could hear them hum. He sat on the couch, bat resting across his lap, staring at the door. Hours passed. The city outside grew quieter, the distant hum of traffic thinning until only silence remained. And then it came again. Click, the sound of the lock turning. Ethan gripped the bat tighter, his breath freezing in his throat. He stared at the door. The chain was still latched, the bolt still set, but the sound came again. Click, creak, and with it, the faint glow of light from his desk. No, Ethan whispered, shaking his head. I unplugged you, but the glow brightened, spilling through the sweaters stuffed in the drawer. He stood slowly, every muscle screaming to run, but unable to look away. Step by step, he crossed the room and pulled open the drawer. The monitors blinked to life, and on the main feed, the front door stood wide open. The warped hallway stretched beyond, longer than it should be, bent like a funhouse corridor. Shadows rippled in strange, jerky patterns along the walls. And there, standing just beyond the threshold, was the figure. Closer now, clearer. Its face no longer a blur, but still wrong, as though the features had been smeared by invisible hands. Its eyes were empty sockets, not dark but hollow, pulling light into them. Ethan staggered back. The bat clattered to the floor. On the feed, the figure stepped into the apartment. Ethan spun toward the door. Still locked. Still chained. Nothing entered. But when he turned back, the monitor showed the figure standing in the living room. Standing right where Ethan stood. He stumbled away, clutching the edge of the couch, breath ragged. He looked around wildly. The room was empty. He was alone. But on the monitor, the figure tilted its head, and slowly, painfully, it smiled. The feed flickered. Static hissed faintly. And then, in a voice low and distorted, the speakers whispered, "We see you." Ethan screamed and yanked the power cord from the wall. Sparks spat. The screen went black. The apartment plunged into silence. He stood there, chest heaving, fist trembling. And then, behind him, the faint echo of a whisper. "We see you." He whirled around, bat raised, heart slamming. Nothing, just shadows. But he couldn't stay here. Not another second. He grabbed his coat, his keys, and bolted for the door. His hand shook so badly it took 3 tries to unchain the lock. He flung the door open and stumbled into the hallway. It was empty, just a faded carpet, dim light bulbs buzzing overhead. The same hall he'd walked 100 times before. But when he looked back at his door, his stomach turned. The number plate was wrong. It didn't read 3A anymore. It read 3B. His neighbor's apartment. Ethan blinked hard. Looked again. The numbers shimmered faintly, like heat rippling off asphalt. Then they were correct again. 3A. His breath came fast, ragged. He staggered backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. He didn't care where he went. He just needed out. He fled down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the cold night. The city air hit his lungs sharp and biting. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Cars hissed by on wet streets. A dog barked in the distance. Human noises, ordinary life. But when he passed a storefront window, he froze. The reflection staring back at him wasn't his own. The glass showed him standing there, but taller, hunched, with hollow eyes and a crooked smile. He stumbled back, slamming into the brick wall behind him. When he looked again, the reflection was gone. Just his pale, exhausted face staring back. Ethan pressed his hands to his temples. "I'm losing it," he muttered. "I'm losing my mind." He walked for hours. Nowhere in particular, just moving as if distance might break whatever grip this thing had on him. By dawn, he was numb, dragging his feet back toward the apartment. The building loomed, gray and familiar, yet hostile now. He stood outside the front doors, staring up at his window. The blinds were drawn. Still, silent, but he could feel it watching. Inside, waiting. He wanted to turn and keep walking, never come back. But where would he go? He had no family nearby. No friends he trusted enough to explain this madness to. And the thought of being alone in a hotel room, surrounded by unfamiliar walls and unknown cameras, was worse. So he went back in. The apartment was just as he'd left it. Couch, desk, silent monitors, dark and unplugged. But the air felt heavier, colder. Ethan sat on the couch, burying his face in his hands. He hadn't eaten in a day. His head throbbed, his stomach knotted. He needed sleep, food, anything to feel human again. And then another sound, not the click of the lock this time. A soft rustle from the bedroom. Ethan's blood ran cold. He gripped the bat and moved slowly, each step a battle against the instinct to run. He pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the sheets on the bed were disturbed, as though someone had just been lying there. And on the pillow, a smear of static. Not dust, not dirt. A faint, grainy distortion, shifting like the flicker of a screen, imprinted across the fabric. Ethan dropped the bat. His knees nearly gave out. He wasn't alone anymore. Whatever had been on those cameras, it wasn't trapped behind glass. It was here. Ethan hadn't slept in what felt like days. His eyes burned, his hands shook constantly, and every corner of his apartment looked like it was hiding something. He had stopped checking the time because clocks only reminded him that the nights were longer than they should be, stretching unnaturally, refusing to end. He had tried everything, calling the landlord again, calling tech support, even pulling the breaker for the entire apartment. But the monitors always came back, humming faintly, glowing softly, their feeds waiting for him. He had thought about leaving for good. He had packed a bag once, stuffed it with clothes and toiletries, shoved it by the door. But when he grabbed the handle to step outside, the monitors had flickered to life on their own, showing him a version of himself dragging the same bag out into the hall. Only in that footage, he never came back. Ethan had stared at the frozen frame of his own back retreating down the hallway for nearly an hour, paralyzed. He didn't know if the cameras were showing the future, or a warning, or something far worse. But he couldn't bring himself to test it. Now he sat on the couch, his bag still by the door, staring at the screens he swore he wouldn't touch again. They glowed in the dark, their static hiss filling the room like shallow breathing. The feed cut, flickered, then stabilized. The living room appeared, normal at first. Then it shifted. The couch was empty, the desk bare, but Ethan was still there, watching. He leaned forward. On the screen, a figure entered the frame. Not the blurred man this time. Himself. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, shoulders slumped, eyes vacant. He watched his double move with slow, heavy steps, dragging the baseball bat across the floor, its wooden tip scraping lines into the carpet. Ethan's breath caught. His hand darted to the real bat lying by his feet. It hadn't moved. He hadn't moved. On the monitor, his double looked up suddenly. Straight at him. Ethan stumbled back, nearly knocking over the coffee table. The figure on the screen tilted its head. Then, with jerky movements, it raised a finger to its lips. Shoo! Ethan's skin prickled. He slammed the power switch, plunging the screens into black. But the sound of scraping continued, long, slow drags across the carpet. He turned. The room was empty, the carpet unmarked. But the sound grew louder. It was coming from a bedroom. Ethan's hand shook as he crept toward the door. He pushed it open with the bat, heart thundering. The room was empty, but the sheets were disturbed again, rumpled as though someone had been thrashing there. And on the pillow, that faint static smear had spread. It pulsed now, faintly, like a heartbeat made of noise. Ethan backed out slowly, slamming the door shut. He pressed his forehead against the wood, trembling. A faint knock came from the other side. Then another. 3 steady knocks, deliberate, patient. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet. He stared at the door as though it might explode open at any moment. The knock stopped, but on the desk, the monitors lit again. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. No, no more. But the hiss of static filled the room, dragging his gaze back. The living room feed glowed. This time, it showed him asleep on the couch. Peaceful. Still. Except Ethan was standing right there, wide awake, staring. His heart hammered. He looked down at his shaking hands. Real. Present. Awake. On the screen, his sleeping self twitched. Its mouth opened slowly, lips forming words. The speakers crackled, then whispered in his own voice. You're not real. Ethan's stomach dropped. He staggered back, gripping the bat tighter. On the screen, his sleeping self sat up. The eyes opened, dark hollows, endless. The mouth split into a wide smile. It stood. The real Ethan spun, eyes darting around the room. Empty. Just him. But when he turned back, the feed showed the double walking toward the camera. Closer. Closer. Until its face filled the screen, static buzzing through every hollow detail. Ethan screamed and hurled the bat at the monitor. The screen cracked, sparks spitting. The image warped into jagged lines. But through the static, the face still grinned. The whisper came again, low and steady, filling the room without the need for speakers. We see you. Ethan clutched his head, falling to his knees. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. And then he realized something. The whisper wasn't coming from the monitor anymore. It was coming from the walls. The walls themselves seemed to hum, vibrating faintly, carrying the words. He pressed his hand against the plaster, trembling. The vibration pulsed beneath his palms. We see you. He stumbled back, chest heaving. His eyes darted around the apartment, desperate for escape. The door. The window. anything. But when he looked at the window, his heart froze. His reflection stared back. Not just his face. The whole room reflected perfectly, except for one detail. In the reflection, he wasn't alone. The blurred figure stood behind him, hands resting lightly on his shoulders. Ethan whirled around, swinging wildly. Nothing, just air. But in the glass, the figure's hands tightened. And Ethan felt it. Cold, heavy, sinking into his skin. He staggered back, breath ragged. The reflection smiled wider, pulling him closer to the glass. Ethan screamed and stumbled away, tripping over the edge of the rug. He collapsed on the floor, clutching his chest. The reflection didn't move. It just watched, waiting. When Ethan finally tore his gaze away, the monitors blinked again. Every feed lit at once. Bedroom, hallway, living room, front door. Each one showed him. Dozens of Ethans, all standing still, all staring into their own cameras. And every single one of them smiled. Ethan's apartment was alive with sound. Static hiss from the monitors, low voices murmured through the walls. The faint scrape of something unseen moved across the floorboards. His chest rose and fell in short, panicked gasps. His eyes burned red, his throat dry, his hands trembling violently. The feeds showed him everywhere, multiplying, endless. Each version of himself stood in perfect stillness, eyes wide, lips curled in that terrible, crooked smile. He wanted to look away, but his gaze locked against his will, as though the screens themselves were holding his head in place. The Ethans on screen began to move. Not all at once, but in ripples, one tilting his head, another raising his hand, another opening his mouth too wide, jaw unhinged. Their movements weren't synchronized, but somehow connected, a choreography he wasn't supposed to understand. The speakers crackled again, voices overlapping, dozens of whispers weaving together into one dreadful chorus. You're not real. You were never real. We see you. Ethan clutched his head, pressing his palms against his ears, but the sound was inside him now, vibrating through his bones. Stop, he screamed. Stop it. But the images only grew clearer. One version of himself on the screen stepped closer to the camera. Its face was pale, hollow-eyed, mouth stretched unnaturally. Another Ethan followed, then another, until the monitors were filled with dozens of faces, pressing against the glass, straining forward as if trying to crawl through. The cracked monitor at the center flickered violently. Ethan staggered back, his knees hitting the couch, and then the glass bulged outward. Not shattered, bulged, warping as though something was pressing from the other side. Ethan scrambled backward, tripping over the rug, landing hard on the floor. His vision blurred with panic. The bulge grew, the screen stretching like skin, straining to hold back what waited beyond. He stumbled to his feet and ran for the door. His hands fumbled with the locks, his fingers slipping. The chain rattled, the bolts stuck. He pulled and yanked, but the door refused to open. Behind him, the monitors groaned. He turned. The screen tore open. From the rip in the glass, a hand emerged, long fingers, skin pale, and flickering with static. It clawed at the air, grasping blindly, pulling itself through. Ethan screamed, pounding at the door. The bolt finally snapped loose. He yanked the door open and bolted into the hall. The corridor stretched impossibly long. The light bulbs overhead flickered, buzzing, elongating shadows that crawled across the walls. The carpet seemed to ripple beneath his feet, each step heavier than the last. Behind him, the sound followed. A scraping, dragging, many footsteps moving as one. He didn't look back. He tore down the hall, down the stairs, into the lobby. The front doors loomed, glass panes glowing faintly with the promise of night air. He shoved them open and staggered into the street. The city was empty. No cars. No voices. The buildings loomed silent and dark, their windows blank eyes watching. Etan spunin cirkles, kist hevint. Help! Somebody please. His voice echoed unnaturally, stretching too long, bouncing back distorted. And then he saw them. Across the street, in every window, his own face stared back. Dozens. Hundreds. All the reflections of himself, smiling down at him with hollow eyes. He stumbled backward, colliding with a lamppost. The metal vibrated beneath his touch. A whisper slid into his ear, close and intimate. "We see you." Ethan turned sharply, swinging his fists at empty air. But the voice didn't stop. It multiplied. From the pavement, from the lamppost, from the shadows, from inside his head. "We see you. We see you. We see you." He ran, street after street, block after block. But the city never changed. The same storefronts repeated, the same alleys branched off. The same flickering streetlight followed him no matter how far he went. It wasn't a city anymore. It was a maze, and every surface reflected his face. Store windows, car mirrors, even puddles on the asphalt rippled with his image, distorted, grinning. His breaths came sharp and ragged. His legs ached, but he kept moving until he collapsed against the side of a building. His palms pressed flat against the cold brick, his forehead resting there. "Wake up," he whispered to himself. "This isn't real. Wake up." But when he opened his eyes, the brick beneath his hands wasn't brick anymore. It was smooth glass, and behind that glass, dozens of Ethans pressed their faces, their mouths moving in perfect unison. "Wake up." The words weren't his anymore. They belonged to them. Ethan staggered back, tripping into the street. The ground pulsed faintly beneath him, as if alive. The air grew heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. The world was folding in on itself. The monitors weren't showing him the apartment anymore. They had never just shown him the apartment. They had been showing him the truth. His world was the feed, and he was the glitch. He fell to his knees, tears stinging his eyes. His reflection stared back from a puddle at his feet, smiling faintly. "Please," Ethan whispered. "Please, I don't want this." The reflection tilted its head. Its mouth moved slowly, deliberately. "But you already are this." The puddle rippled, distorting his face. And then hands, static, pale, endless, reached up from the water, gripping his wrists. Ethan screamed, pulling back, but the reflection held tight, its grin splitting impossibly wide. The city lights flickered, the ground trembled, and the voices roared in unison, shaking the air itself. "We see you." The water swallowed him whole. Silence. The puddle stilled. The street was empty again. The monitors in the apartment glowed faintly in the dark. Feeds quiet, rooms empty. The couch sat untouched. The desk bare. The windows still. But in the corner of the living room feed, just for a moment, a figure stood. Tall, pale, shoulders crooked. It leaned closer to the camera and smiled.